it's nice to meet over the internet like this, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's always funky.
Yeah. Are you New York based? Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm in New York. Yeah.
Word. How do you like it over there? You been there a couple years?
I've been here a number of years.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, that takes you back all the way to start because I've always wondered, like, Love Tractor and all the R.E.M. B-52s. You guys always talk about New York, man. You guys just wanted to go play up there, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. So we, I've been here for 20 something, 25 years, but
Really?
then even before that with the band, we would have major stop-offs here and stay here. So it was always kind of a second home.
Yeah. So it was more of a hub back then because, like, kind of speaking for Athens bands now, it's not really one of those places that people go play anymore, kind of, in my opinion.
Yes, I don't know. It was, obviously back then it was, there was no internet and there were no cell phones. So New York City was really fascinating because, it was very inexpensive to live here.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to learn what was going on and what was happening is you went out every night.
Yeah.
You went clubbing.
Of course.
And so it, was an amazing culture. And so the first thing a lot of us did when, we got out of school or whatnot was to get our asses out of Athens and get to New York.
Yeah.
And, even while we were in school, Love Tractor we did our first album when we were still in school. You would hop in cars and drive to New York for long weekends.
Really?
To play shows.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Was that the first destination you guys kind of reached out to after Athens?
Yep.
That's crazy to me. It seems so wild because it's so, like, far in theory, but like nowadays bands just go to like local college towns, kind of, it seems like.
Yeah, it was New York, Washington, D.C., Philly, Chicago, Boston, it was big cities.
Totally.
And because people really sort of migrated to those. It was a little bit later that the college towns, sort of more mid 80s, when the college towns really started to happen, and R.E.M. sort of opened up that avenue.
Totally.
Whereas the B-52s sort of opened up New York. The B-52s came, their first show was across from the taco stand in Athens, and then the next show was at Max's Kansas City and CBGB's in New York.
Wow.
And they were an overnight sensation in New York City, and they sort of opened it up for us and Pylon and R.E.M. And so we would do long weekends and drive up, and because they're really, the college town thing wasn't really, all the college towns in the South were still hillbilly. Like downtown Athens was, honest to God, on a Saturday night, you could go lie down in the middle of College and Clayton.
Really?
And not get hit by it. It was desolate. It was desolate.
That's crazy. I can't even imagine that. It just seems so backwards from what I've come to know since moving here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and you guys, I read in all these books like Cool Town. I don't know if you've read that one, and a few other Athens books, like that there just were no bands really except for like fraternity bands or whatever until you guys kind of started popping up in the late 70s, early 80s kind of thing, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, there were cover bands.
Yeah.
So it was like your high school dance band. And or really bad Southern rock kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so for us, and I say us, I always repeatedly say us, meaning the art school, people that were in the art school at UGA at the time. We were kind of a different breed than the rest of the university. The rest of the university was a big football redneck school.
Yeah.
Maybe it still is. And it's certainly much hipper now than it was but there was nothing. And then slowly but surely, I mean, we would have parties, and on these old houses on Meg Street, on Cobb Street, on Barber Street, a lot of the big old houses there, and we would have major parties, and it'd be everyone from art school would come, and and so somebody would be spinning records, and then somebody finally got the bright idea of like, hey, let's pick up a guitar and create a band, and so we all started creating bands to play these parties.
And how
it was really, it wasn't like we were the ones creating the scene. It was really everyone else, the audience, that was creating the scene.
Interesting. So like your friends kind of wanting you guys to play was kind of the way it happened.
Yeah.
That's fascinating, man.
Yeah. They were just as important as the bands.
Totally.
They participated in concepting a lot of the stuff that went on at the time. The coffee club. I mean, you have to understand that Athens was desolate. It was, everyone was in a fraternity or sorority, and there were very few clubs, if any, and so we made our own fun.
Yeah.
And that was part of it. And local artists would do all the posters or design your album covers, or people you were in school with. And so it's all very participatory. Brian Eno has a term for it, I believe, called scenism. That a band doesn't really come, it's the scene itself is what is created, and a band or something out of it is just sort of a symptom of it.
I see. You said scenism, is that correct?
Scenism.
That's awesome. I'm gonna have to write that down. That's a good one. That makes a lot of sense too, because like the art school is not very big either. Is it? How many kids are you guys looking at back then? 100, 200?
150.
Wow.
150 maybe. It was the old art school that's on Jackson Street. It's now, I think, landscape architecture or something.
Totally.
It's that white building.
Yes, of course.
Really cool building.
Yeah. So you guys all knew each other.
Everyone knew each other. Everyone was really close. I mean, everyone was slept together. They were roommates, had classes together. And, the schedule was such that we would have two studio classes, two 2-hour studio classes, an art history class. So, that was 5 hours that you were at the art school a day, and then maybe one class out, like sociology or something else out in the university.
Elective.
So you really you spent your day at the art school.
Totally.
And the professors that were there at the time were really amazing, and really encouraged what we were doing musically, because they saw it as an extension of conceptual art.
Absolutely.
And we approached it that way.
So at the time, did you guys, like, when somebody asked you guys, would you call yourselves like art rock or something like that? Or would you
totally.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
We can totally consider ourselves art rock. I would say especially Love Tractor and Pylon. I mean, we had no sense of wanting to be rock stars or have hit albums. We wanted to make music that sort of tickled our own fancy.
Yeah, it was kind of a statement.
It was a statement to us. We weren't trying to impress anybody except ourselves.
Totally.
Oh, that's who we're, and the only thing I would say that really went in tandem with it was you had to be able to dance to it.
Of course.
Had to be able to dance to it. So that's why, Athens produced, at least in that time, in my era, produced like the best drummers ever.
Yes, totally. I could see that.
And so, everyone was a dance band.
Yeah, some really good guitars too, man. Don't downplay the guitars, man. That jangle.
I'm not Ricky. People forget about like Ricky Wilson. Ricky Wilson sort of changed it for everybody because he was so unique the way he played guitar. And Randy Bewley, a lot of great guitar players. But everyone, it was a small group of us, and we were all buddies. We all shared equipment. We shared studios. We all had a studio space on Jackson Street that we shared.
All the bands, or just a couple of you guys, or I'd say most.
Side Effects, R.E.M, Love Tractor, and Pylon would practice above the grill on the top floor. Curtis Crow had a studio.
Really? Is like, I believe do they call it Pylon Park, or is that the house that everybody lived in?
Pylon Park was 265 Barber Street. And that's where I lived with Sam C. Wright, Kit Swartz, who was a drummer in Love Tractor, and was also in the Side Effects, and Michael and Curtis from Pylon lived upstairs in the house.
Really? What was it like being there? I assume you guys were kind of just engulfed in the whole art music thing. I mean, everybody in the house being that kind of vibe, right?
Totally. And it was a huge place. It was a huge old house. It's been completely restored. A great guy named Richard Owens lives there now. But we had, huge yard. It backed up to the president's yard. Like on Prince Avenue, the president of UGA's house backyard went that far back down Barber Street, and so it backed up to that. And it was like Pink Flamingos, the movie by John Waters. There was like an old pink trailer behind the house that Michael from Pylon, Michael Husky, great photographer, great artist, great bass player, would have photo shows in the trailer.
Really?
We would have these amazing house parties at that house, and back in the yard, in the summertime and whatnot.
With all the bands playing, or just
bands playing? Yeah, always with a band playing, always.
Yeah. See, that's one of those things that's kind of been, I hate to say killed off, because I mean, they still happen now and again, but pretty tapped in on the current scene, and the house party thing just kind of doesn't fly anymore, it'll get shut down, so it's tough.
Yeah, maybe you have to move farther out in the country. I mean,
maybe so
for it, but there was no music industry in Athens at the time, and no people were moving there to be in bands. And at a certain point, we put out an album. I think we got off on tour, and we come back, and all of a sudden, we run into kids that are moving to Athens to be in bands.
Yeah. And
it was quite different because, when I started school there, it was, it sort of becomes blurry to me, because when I started school in the band thing, it all kind of happened at the same time. But then there was a moment where it became national, and then people started coming into Athens.
Around when was that moment? Like 1982, 80, somewhere in there?
I'd say like 83, 84.
Okay. I can see that.
Became much more commercialized, and
did you guys realize that you were onto something, kind of? Like, did the scene like kind of know that it was happening, or was like just nobody aware? Just one day Athens is a music location that kids are showing up to?
Mike Mills and I were at a party. Mike Mills, the bass player from R.E.M.
Of course.
And I don't know what the party was. There were so many insane parties in Athens at the time. Insane, beyond belief. And, a lot of LSD. And,
the era.
And other things. But, we were sitting around, and we're at some party, and we looked at each other, and we said, we can't believe we're living through this. That, it's like Haight-Ashbury in the 60s, it's all happening around us. And it kind of blew our minds.
Yeah. So it's completely unexpected. You know what I mean? To show up in Athens, you know, you show up in what year? 19.
I showed up in 1977. I was a freshman.
So from 77 to like, I assume you graduated 81-ish, 82-ish, like
Yeah.
just huge change in Athens, wouldn't you say?
Oh, huge change.
Massive.
And I mean, when I arrived in 1977 is right when it started. 76, 77, right when it started. And so it was, and just going to art school, you were immediately thrown into the thick of it.
Uh-huh.
And
Perfect entry.
yeah, I mean, it was like if you were in art school, if you're at the UGA art school, you were automatically part of a club.
Really?
And trust me, you were part of that club because we all had to protect each other because the frat boys would chase us down the street and try to beat us up. I'm not kidding.
Really? That's crazy.
I'm serious. And so, I mean, we all got to know each other there. I mean, Vanessa Briscoe, hey, from Pylon. I mean, she and I used to sit on the floor in the hallways between classes and smoke cigarettes, or it's just the whole, Michael Stipe introduced me to Armstead Welford, who ended up being the bass player in Love Tractor. That's how tight knit it was.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of names I could roll off that you would know or people would know that are rock fans, but there are a lot of other people that were just as important to it all.
Like the people doing the posters and the woo-og people and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and just encouraging us aesthetically with what they might be into aesthetically was something that would turn us on to something and carry over. A bunch of us would leave. We'd finish school. A lot of us were late starters. Interestingly enough, when I came for freshman orientation, I had an advisor named Ronald Coleman. And he asked me, he said, "Are you a morning person or are you a night person?" And I never really thought about it. I hated getting up in the morning. I said, "I guess I'm a night person." He says, "Okay." And he set me up where I never had a class that started before 1 p.m.
Really?
And so, which gave me, all day. We would finish up about 6 with school, go eat, go do any work I needed to do, and then go out and party all night.
And get to sleep in every day.
And sleep in every day. And when I tell you party every night, we partied every night. Michael Husky from Pylon had a answering machine on his telephone, and that we call the party line. And you would call it, and because there was no Facebook, there was no social media, and you would call it, and Michael would have a listing of every party that was going on in town that night.
Really?
And there's that B-52 song "Party Out of Bounds" where it's like, oh no, not them, that was us.
Really?
Because we would go crash any party that was happening.
So you would call the number and the voicemail answer would be the list of parties? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Party on Hill Street. We don't know them. So-and-so we know is having a party on such street. No parties tonight, but we're, it's 25-cent beer night at the Last Resort.
Yeah.
Something like that. And
that's hilarious.
We would go crash, these fraternity sorority parties. And, it would be like, these people would, they're like freaked out because we were the freaks coming in and
really
taking over. And we would sort of go en masse to these things so that we were protected. And
strength in numbers.
And the Athens police didn't really care.
Yeah.
It wasn't, Athens police and the university police was like, if they pulled you over, for drunk driving, it was a laugh. It was a joke. You
Really?
can always talk your way out of it. It's
That's
like, I'm
wild.
not going to jail.
Don't work anymore, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess not.
But in this era, I do hear some stories of like, I guess it's the R.E.M. ones are the usually ones I hear, but like them sort of playing some fraternity parties too. Did Love Tractor ever do that kind of thing? Because that's kind of seems to be the bread and butter of bands now. Like if you want to be profitable at all or kind of build a bigger audience, it's fraternity parties, sorority parties, kind of sort of.
it sort of it happened a little bit later for
Okay.
I mean, it's everything happened so fast.
Uh-huh.
It that time seems condensed, but it did sort of happen later, where the fraternity sorority people became more accepting of it and realized what was going on. Yeah, so we would play those, but not really. Later on, we would play some if we were back in town working on a record, and then they wanted to pay the price. We would go play just to practice new material. But one of the interesting things that R.E.M. did was that like Pylon, Love Tractor, B-52s, we were always just between Athens and New York, basically. And R.E.M. took a really different approach because, they were much more accessible in the sense that they had this really great front man.
Totally.
And, Michael's such a, personality and such a great front man. And that they could go and play a gig and play straight up rock and roll. If the beer bottles started flying, they could switch into, just straight up rock, straight up rock and roll.
Absolutely.
And so they branched out and started opening up all the college towns, up through Chapel Hill, all the college towns in North Carolina, Tennessee, and they moved out that way. And it really branched out, and it was really genius on their part because it sort of helped sort of create this atmosphere of college rock.
Yes.
Became college rock. And then it opened it up for us all to go and do that route as well. But they had the luck of, like I said, of they could immediately turn back into a regular rock band if they had, if the beer bottles started flying. Whereas we didn't, neither did Pylon. I mean, we were all as arty as you could possibly get.
Yes.
And we didn't care.
And you guys I assume you're like seeing these bands, like, because I kind of think of B-52s as like a little bit earlier than the rest of them, which I suppose they are, but like you're kind of taking notes from these other bands, right? Like you see R.E.M. start hitting the road, you guys start doing that, or was it the same kind of time period? You know what I mean?
It's the same time period.
Yeah.
I mean, we were all, B-52s first. B-52s happened, and they got signed immediately to Warner Brothers and moved to New York. And, but they didn't forget their hometown. And so anytime we would come to New York, we were taken care of by the B-52s. And, and you have to understand at the time, the B-52s, I mean, this is way before Love Shack and sort of, big pop hits. But they were considered this really kind of amazing art band, and they were. And it was really because of Keith and Ricky, who wrote the music. And Ricky played his guitar playing was amazing. He would play a 4-string and a 5-string guitar with odd tunings.
Yeah, very surf sounding kind of.
If you go listen to like their second album, listen to a song like Dirty Back Roads, and you'll hear what.
Is that the one with Dance This Mess Around? Is that the yellow record? Is that correct?
The yellow record is the first one. The second one is the red one. But listen to the music, listen to what's happening in the music. And, no one was doing references. They were doing, Fred was actually rapping
Yeah.
And, this is pre-rap.
Very
And,
early.
and the girls were referencing Yoko Ono,
Mm-hmm.
um, who is a great artist.
Absolutely.
And then, borrowing from that sort of like girl group 60s thing, and this amalgam of all of that. And they had no intention of becoming a great rock band or anything like that. And they went to New York, and, it blew Blondie and the Ramones and the Talking Heads and all those people away. It just blew them away. And I mean, it was just like they were immediately signed to Warner Brothers, and then they moved to New York. And so when we would go to New York to play, they would always bring everybody out to see us.
Really?
And we would end up staying with them. Mm-hmm. And so, everyone looked after everyone else.
So it's still kind of the community thing. Like there was no kind of hard feelings like, oh, they got signed and they just left. There was none of that kind of, totally understandable.
Yeah. Oh, we're all best friends.
That's awesome.
Still, I mean, all the bands, we're all,
really,
what bands are left, but, are the pieces of the bands, and, we're all dear, dear friends. We've known each other now for so long, and, went through so much together. And, we all really encouraged each other.
Yeah.
We were like really happy when another band was really successful. Mm-hmm. And because the other thing that was really important at the time was everybody wanted to sound different from each other.
Totally. I can see that.
Although when I go back and I listen to everyone's first album, I can hear each other, all of us influencing each other.
A little jangle.
Yeah, jangle. I don't know where that came from, because, maybe from R.E.M. I mean, because Peter's guitar playing had a little bit of jangle, but, when it came to like us and the B-52s and Pylon, I think there was a little more angle than jangle.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
To it, but it was very heady, interesting times. It was very interesting, and any of the sort of crazy major acts that came through at the time, we all got to hang out with them. With Neil Young, with Iggy Pop. It was fascinating. That we got to experience all of that. And then when we would go on tour, who we would play with and who we would see and who we would experience and whatnot. And again, like everybody helped everybody else out.
It's awesome. That community's great.
Yeah.
That helps a ton. And you guys kind of have that like shared, like you're all kind of starting to kind of, I hate to say blow up, but, get some exposure at the same time. So like shared experiences. I'm sure you guys asked each other all kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, like R.E.M. would come back from tour and say, like, why aren't you guys on tour doing it this way? Why aren't you, going up to the Carolinas and hitting this? And we're like, okay, we'll go do that, because we were just going and sort of doing our New York, on the weekends thing. And they came back and, had paved this path for everybody else. And opened up all of these other clubs. I mean, we're about to re-release an album called Themes from Venus that we recorded with Mitch Easter. And I remember when we were recording that album with Mitch in the late 80s, that we were joking about and Mitch was in a band called Let's Active. Mm-hmm. And that we would go play clubs, and the clubs always it'd be like a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night, always an off night. Uh-huh. But it was their new wave night.
Ah, gotcha.
And so we said, why don't we start a band called New Wave Nights? But that's what it was. It was like, you would play these college towns that wanted to be hip, or the clubs would have their new wave night, and that's where we would get our bookings. And it built from there, and it built, and then it became more accepted. And,
on those first couple tours though, or weekend runs or whatever you guys are doing, was it like a big culture shock going to places like, North Carolina and South Carolina and those, I mean, wherever you guys did go? Was it like, oh wow, there's college towns here too with kids that love this kind of music? Or how was it like?
it was interesting. Definitely interesting. The first time that we were doing like kind of, you know, lesser cities, we were doing the towns, it was like new wave night. And
Okay.
you might be dodging some, you'd hear, faggots, get the faggots off the stage.
Uh-huh.
And, you might dodge a beer bottle or two.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Just
but
country towns kind of.
Columbia, South Carolina,
Uh-huh.
I hope no one's, I'm not slagging Columbia, South Carolina, but it just, wasn't what it, you know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
um, but, but what we would do is fill in for us. Our big money makers were the, the big cities,
Uh-huh.
because they just, we got played on radio there. And, for example, Washington, D.C. had a commercial station that played alternative music, or what became called alternative music, called HFS. And so we could go to DC and, we would play 2 nights at the 930 Club, 2 shows a night. And then drive, across Virginia to W&L College and play some party there with, 100 drunk frat boys that wanted to beat us up. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And but then that changed. When the records started, more records came out, that changed. And it was interesting. I mean, especially when you're all of a sudden you're playing in the middle of Iowa.
Yeah.
And
But that's
the
strange.
college is really, want to, and they're paying your full rate. And it's a big deal, and and you're doing that kind of stuff. Road work is a whole different thing than recording. And
Absolutely.
and we did a ton of road work.
You guys are kind of known as a road band, right? Not as much as a studio band, correct?
Well, we spent a lot of time on the road to really work our records, because they were art records. They weren't the types of records that you would immediately have commercial success from.
Gotcha.
And so we spent a lot of time working those to develop an audience.
Okay.
And then we also, unfortunately, had management and agents that would keep us on the road. So that's how they made their money.
Okay. Like booking fees and stuff.
Yeah.
Of course.
And for us, and that was difficult. It was really difficult. And in fact, it was one of the reasons we, in like the early 90s, we said we have to take a break. We'd signed to a new management company and told the management company that we needed a year off to write and to get our heads together, because we'd just come off of 3 years of nonstop touring, and where we had put out a record and we'd done a year by ourselves. Then we did 60 dates, spread out over, I don't know how many months, with the B-52s. That was, when they had R.E.M. and Love Shack and those hits. And then when we finished that tour, we had to go back out on the road for another year to work the record.
It's a crazy amount of touring.
And that's what record companies wanted also, was, now, and back then you didn't make money from touring. You made your money from record sales.
Gotcha.
And now bands don't make any money from record sales.
It's completely
they make all
flip-flop.
their money from touring.
Yeah.
But for us, it was all about that. We really had to work hard to develop an audience. But we, I remember it was like 91 or something. We got off the road and we said, we need a break. And, we signed with this new agency and these fellows out of Memphis. And in fact, I remember we were in Memphis doing demos, and I don't know if you know who Alex Chilton was. Uh, Alex was hanging out of the studio, and he's like, "You guys are burnt out," and we're like, "Yeah." Alex was in the Box Tops and wrote that song "September Girls," who's a really famous musician, and and we told our management that we needed this time off, and they said sure. And the next thing we know is they booked us like strings of dates.
Really?
We were under contract for.
Oh man.
And I was furious. And so we went out and we did those string of dates to get out of the contract, and we fired the management and we said let's just take a couple of years off. Let's take and write and record, and do demos and take care of ourselves. And that ended up being like 3 years off, where we would get together and record and write a little bit, and we had an album completed, which I think we shelved. Mm-hmm. And then we wrote another album, and which was finished in 95, but we knew that if we put it out then, that they would immediately want us to go on the road. Mm. So we sat on it until like 99, and then we started shopping it to labels. So basically we took like 8 years off.
Really?
And then we shopped it to labels, and we went to Razor and Tie, and they took it, and of course immediately wanted us to go out on the road,
do the rounds
and do the rounds again. Mm-hmm. And we just weren't having it. And we said, we've got to figure out another way that we want to do this, and figure out a way that that pleases us, and sort of get back to the way that we wanted to make music in the first place, which was not to be a moneymaker for everybody else, nor to be a moneymaker for us, but to create music that jazzed us, that turned us on.
That's awesome, man. That's really well put, man. And was it kind of at the time though? I mean, you're kind of hitting I'd say, well, personally for me at least, a creative peak with like Themes from Venus is just a great record, complete all the way through. Like, is it scary to kind of hang it up right after that? You know what I mean? Like, you guys are kind of on the plateau per se.
It was very scary to do that, because the record was a really good record, and we worked it really hard, and we wrote the record. We really wrote the record to work as this entirety of a record. That there is not an album just kind of throwaway track on it. Like, every song is specifically, and we overwrote for the record so that we had more material that we could pick from. And then we immediately said, yeah, let's start writing the next record, but we need time off. And the management sort of screwed us, and so we took care of those dates, but we did start writing the next record. Mm-hmm. And we wrote it, and I kind of compare ourselves to Kraftwerk. Yeah. If something's not right, I mean, we take so much time in between. If something's not right, we will shelve it.
Yeah.
And we wrote a record, and we shelved about half of it. And then when we decided to. We said, we thought, no, not these songs, and we need to write more. And because we demoed them, and half of the record I think was good, and then we started writing more, and that album ended up being The Sky at Night for Razor and Tie, which didn't come out until 2001.
Really?
I mean, everyone was like, "Where have you guys been?" It's like we've been, we've been writing, and I mean, we have a lot of songs that we've never released, and we're actually going through now and going to. I'm having trouble hearing you. We found we found that whole record that we shelved, and then we realized there were actually some really great songs.
Oh man.
And so we're going to re-record a bunch of that stuff, and we've got, you know, material for basically 3 albums that we're just sort of sitting on, and we're slowly recording. The record company we're with now wants an album and next year from us.
Of new stuff or a reissue?
New stuff.
Okay.
The reissues will be coming out as well. You know, we're remastering the records and redoing all the art. We're doing everything that we wanted to do, but the record companies wouldn't let us do.
Really?
To our albums. You know, remixing some of them, mastering the way we wanted to, you know, because back in the day, we would finish a record and it would just get sent off to the record company. The record company would send it off to be mastered. You would not be involved in that at all.
Really? Okay.
And so now we can be involved in that process, and you know, we can do things we want, and it's still us, and we still think the same way when it comes to music. I mean, it's not like we have ever said we need to write a hit. We did an album called This Ain't No Outer Spaceship.
Yes.
Which was for a subsidiary of RCA, and the owner of the label, it was a great roster of bands on the label, a really amazing roster of bands. But the label itself went belly up, and then RCA just took everything and shelved it. And what was interesting about the record was, like, I remember finishing it. You know, it was one of the first times that we had a producer that came in and, you know, worked on the arrangements with us, and you know, really kind of worked us for the record, and had a very specific vision for the sound of the record. And you know, the record was done, and it gets sent to RCA, and you know, they take it from there. You know, we have no say so in it at all.
Is this themes you're talking about right now, or
this ain't no outer spaceship?
Gotcha.
And themes was I never liked the mastering. And it was really only mastered for vinyl. And so when it came to it, we went back to the whole library of it. We and you know, found tracks that we'd done with another producer named Brendan O'Brien, who produced Pearl Jam and a bunch of, you know, acts that became huge. And you know, they weren't huge you know, he wasn't working with those huge acts at the time. And so we've got some of the stuff that he worked on this reissue, and then, you know, we got to remaster it, and the mastering really sounds good. And then the next record we're going to put out is our second album, called Around the Bend, which is really a transitional record for us, because it was when we started to introduce vocals into what we were doing. There was still a lot of instrumental, but you can see that each song has a different flavor to it, and you can see that we're sort of working through what we wanted to do. And to me, which makes it a really interesting record. And it's not like our first album, and it's not like Themes from Venus. It's not this whole cohesive thing.
Gotcha.
And it's stylistically, it's very diverse.
Was that the reason kind of for like skipping it? Because I was going to ask you why you guys reissued the first one and then went to Themes. I just wondered what the reasoning was.
because they themes and the first album bookend each other in a sense, because they're both written as a whole. They're both completely conceptualized as a whole.
I can see that.
And one is at the start of us, and it's 100% instrumental, and it was written as one album and as a whole. And then you have the snapshot of Themes from Venus, that we had reached a level of what really I considered our apex of maturity as a band, because we'd spent so much time on the road. And it's like very much like the first album, in the sense that the concept of it is it's an entire piece of music, and it's very thought out. So they match in that way, and I wanted to contrast them and release the records out of order. In fact, it to me is really important. It was important to show this album next to this album.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
And then the next record is kind of to show, at least to us, I mean, maybe the audience gets this, but for me, it's like, it's just how I wanted to do it, really. And the band did too, because we've kind of never given a shit what people wanted us to do.
It's very on brand for you guys to just do it in whichever order you want. I like that.
However long it takes, and how we do it. It's, if you only knew like how much stuff we would record and throw in the garbage can. And just because we did, the record company might think this is like going to be the biggest hit on the planet. And we were like, yuck, this is terrible. And so the next record, is Around the Bend, and that's we're going to re-release that, and I've already remastered it. And the master, it sounds great.
Oh, really? That's exciting.
And the cover is beautiful.
Oh man.
So I'm excited about that. And then we have an album we started. It's interesting because after that album, after our second album, we started an album, and we never really finished it. And it came out as an EP because we had to go on the road. But it actually ended up at the time being one of our biggest albums. And well, it was actually EP, because we did a cover of what nobody at the time even knew who the band was. We did a cover of Kraftwerk's song Neon Lights.
Yes.
And which ended up being number one on college radio and all the alternative charts, and sat there for weeks at number one. And it also, for me, it was the record was pointing in this direction that I really wanted to take the band, and I think the band wanted to go, which you start to see on This Ain't No Outer Spaceship, and then really comes to fruition on Themes from Venus. And then when we did The Sky at Night, you really see it sort of come to fruition. And it's interesting right now what we're writing now, we're going back and working on. It's interesting. Because we're working sort of in a different way with some of the songs that we've never worked before, where, like I would have a song that maybe I've written the music to, and I'd send the tape to Mike, and Mike would write the lyrics and the melodies and whatnot too. And then we'd take it to the studio and completely rearrange it in the studio. And usually we write by collaboratively. We collaborate. We get together and we hash out the music that way, and then we would take it on the road and road work it, and then go record it. And
music's so technical. I can't see any other way that you guys could do it. You know what I mean? Like separately. It seems so grows so much. You know what I mean?
There's a precision in our music that's it's hard for me to explain, actually, but the music is very precise the way we write it, so that if one little thing is off, that like a song will completely fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we would go and road work the music. And because once the song was written, we really had to get it in the pocket and know it and have the dexterity and whatnot to play it. Even though it might sound like a simple rock song, it was very precise. And it's interesting, we're playing in March at the 40 watt, and we just put together a set list, and there's certain songs I'm looking on the set list. I'm like, oh my God, I've really got to go and work on these together, because it's like, if I don't hit this one little thing, it's not like I'm just, we're strumming and hitting bar chords. There's not that. There's a little bit, we try to, it's not like we're a jam band either. But there's a precision in it that that has to be captured. And
I'd always wondered if like the way you guys kind of make songs like grow per se, like that there isn't as much repetition as there is kind of growth, in my opinion. Is that kind of a product of like not having a singer at first and being kind of instrumental first? Like, we got to make this entertaining. We can't just bar chord it up, verse, chorus, it. You know what I mean?
I think that's very perceptive. I think you're probably one of the first people to ever point that out. But yeah, I think it came from our instrumental days that we always knew that there had to be a dynamic sort of increase within a song. And then a good friend of mine at the time, the lead singer of a band called the Bongos, who actually hooked us up with our first booking agent. And he pointed out something that we had never realized. He said, you do something in your songs that not many people do, is that there's always the unexpected. So that there's a turnaround. It might go from, like, even in an instrumental song, what we would consider a verse and a chorus, that the turnaround in it is completely unexpected, how it goes. And that sort of always stuck with us. But always there is that build in the songs and development. And in fact, interestingly enough, we've actually looked at that and said, how can we write songs that work without that?
Really?
But it always ends up going the other way. We did a song, there's a kind of semi-instrumental song on the album The Sky at Night, called As the Ship Sails On, which is probably my favorite Love Tractor song of all time. And it has one lyric in it. And the lyric is, is this the sound of rain falling underwater? That's the lyric. That's it. And it only happens in one place in the song. And it's all instrumental. But I thought it was going to stay like this sort of level song, but sure enough, I had to add strings.
And
and this drop down and this change, and it's like it just happens. It's we can't help ourselves sometimes.
It's the Love Tractor formula. I like it, man. It makes you guys you know what I mean?
It is. Well, there is a bit of a formula, but there's also, we try to break that formula. We try to break the formula. In fact, I've got this. Mike has been in the studio working on a piece of music, and I've got this big idea to like blow it up, and to sort of break the formula, and we'll see what he says about that. Because it's something that he's like, he really loves this song and he really likes it. I've told him, I've got this big idea and it's gonna blow it up, and it's just weird, and so we'll see.
I guess kind of backpedaling a little bit, but this is I'm just curious. Was it I guess I assume it was a relief, but was it frustrating when like you guys are putting out all this great original music and it's getting exposure and stuff, and then you release one cover and it goes to #1 on college radio?
No, it was so weird. It
Yeah.
was, but it was really a good song. And it was like, I really believe that you cannot, the only way you can do a cover song is if you can improve upon the song.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I really get upset when I hear over and over again, you know, maybe some song, someone's covering it and they don't make it any better.
Yes.
You know, like, you know, I've heard people do like David Bowie's Ashes to Ashes. And it's just like so twee and naff and not very good. And the only person I've heard do it better is Michael did a version of it at a live performance somewhere. I think at a David Bowie tribute. And,
Gotcha.
And because Michael's voice has matured in such a way that's really fascinating.
Yes.
And I really, really like the way his singing is now. And I like the singles that he's putting out.
Me too. I've been enjoying this. I'm glad to see it.
I think they're really, really good. Yeah. And just, and it really, it's, anyway, I could just go on about it.
Me too, man.
It makes me really happy. Last time I saw him, I was just like, I was telling him that how much I loved it. I just thought they were great. It's like, make more.
He's a New York man as well, isn't he?
He is, yeah. Yeah, he's here. There are a bunch of Athenians here.
Yeah.
There are a lot. And they, you know, they keep coming.
You guys are migrated.
We're all migrating. You know, but it's, you know, it's still rock and roll town, you know, Brooklyn.
Was there ever a moment in the Love Tractor, I guess, just discography or touring life where you guys are like, yes, we finally crossed the plateau into where we want to be? Do you get, that's a big question, I know. Was there ever a ta-da moment? You know what I mean?
There was, and it was really around Themes from Venus, where we had been on the road for so long. We had been on the road for a long time working This Ain't No Outer Spaceship, and then Themes from Venus, that our precision as musicians was, I listened to tapes from that era on this live, and I'm kind of blown away because I can't play that way anymore. I just can't. I don't, you know, because it came from playing every night.
Yes.
You know, and this sort of dexterity that you generate, and it's not like riding a bicycle, and at all, and so there was for us, and also, you know, going out on big stages where we weren't nervous or anything like that, and you know, I don't know what year that was, but you become, when you're, at least for us as a band, we were two bands. There was the live band, and then there was the sort of recording, writing band. And we would have to put on two different hats for that.
Gotcha.
And so for me, the ta-da moment when it came to sort of recording or production or creating a sound was when we did the EP that had neon lights on it. Was this ta-da, because it had these specific things happening that I really liked. And I saw it as this sort of direction. But then live, it was somewhere in the late 80s or early 90s, you know, where we could walk out on any stage and play anything in our repertoire, anything. You know, someone screamed a song and, you know, play this, we'd say, all right, you know, and, you know, knock it out of the park.
Really?
You know, just like a home run. And that was great. That was really fun to be able to do that.
But that's amazing, man. I wonder, is there any, I know it's also a big ask because you guys have played so much, but like any like marquee shows that you look back on super fondly, like that was a great night, or 40 Watt Club, that was a great night, or New York City, anything that sticks out to you?
I, you know, I would say probably the first time we ever played
Really?
at Pylon Park with a like a little drum machine,
Uh-huh.
and it was, and all of our friends all of our friends wasted. People who I won't name
Uh-huh.
because they're famous, you know, falling off a porch and trying to pee off a porch and falling into bushes and whatnot. Playing like 3 nights at Radio City Music Hall,
Uh-huh.
stuff like that. You know, it's cool thing,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Stuff you'll never forget, I'm sure.
Yeah, you don't forget it. And,
Yeah.
you drive by and you go, oh, yeah, I played there. you
Uh-huh.
know,
Yeah.
Universal Amphitheater, um, different theaters, different places. You know, I remember we played the Tower Theater in Philadelphia, and
Uh-huh.
that's where Bowie recorded uh, a live album called David Live, which I
Uh-huh.
really loved in high school. I loved the way his singing was on that record. It was right after his album Diamond Dogs, and he decided to take all of the songs, all of his old back catalog, and make it into Plastic Soul.
Uh-huh.
And so he funked it all up. And he had been on the road, obviously, for a long time. And his
A long
voice
time.
had reached this place. It was kind of raspy and kind of Rolling Stones-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And I really dug it. And, playing that same place was it was like, it was like a cool vibe for me. You get to go
Yeah.
play where your heroes,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you get to go meet your heroes. And, that was always really cool to me.
Well, that's kind of full circle, man. Cause like when bands in Athens, when we come and play 40 Watt now, we're like, man, Pylon, Love Tractor, R.E.M, B-52s, all those guys, they started this, you know what I mean? It carries some weight.
Yeah.
Very cool. And
We
you,
had no idea.
you had no idea.
We had no
And did you
idea.
ever play? I assume you'd be the Uptown location to be you guys played, right? 40 Watt. That was always you.
We played every 40-watt location.
Even the first one.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
We played every 40-watt location.
Does
So
it carry the same weight? Like I was wondering if like what you guys thought about like the current location. Like, is it the same, or do you guys like, man, I wish it was still over Uptown? You know what I mean?
it's the 40-watt. It's,
Mm-hmm.
there's Barry,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's Valina,
Yeah. I love Lena.
so there's, it's, it's the 40. It's changed locations, but,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we played it, when it was above, I don't know what is there now. It was a sandwich shop called Udi's on the corner of, um, is it Broad Street, Broad and College? I think it's Starbucks, and playing upstairs above there,
Mm-hmm.
and which really was kind of the first 40-watt. The other, what was called the 40-watt, was Curtis Crow's art studio, which really was, wasn't really a club.
Uh-huh.
It was just a party location. But the first sort of commercial club was across the street, and then it moved down onto, I always forget my streets in Athens.
Me
Is it
too.
Broad Street? Is where the Caledonia?
Yeah, that's correct.
And it
Yeah.
moved there. Then
Uh-huh.
it moved uptown, and then it moved back down to that location,
Mhm.
and then it moved to its current location.
Gotcha.
But it was always, Jared, Barry, Felina, you know, Pat the Wiz, who did sound, who no longer does sound. And then we also played a place called Tyrone's,
Yes, I've
which
read a
was
lot about this place.
before the 40 Watt Club, and it was a it was a rock and roll place. It was sort of like CBGB's in the fact that it was it was built like CBGB's was supposed to be like a blues club, like with like a hippie bar, and Tyrone's was sort of that. But they caught on really quickly that they could fill the place. It cost $1 to get in. That was the cover charge. But they could fill the place, with all of these art students. And they had a little stage off to the side. And then they rearranged the whole room and built a bigger stage and to accommodate, make the acts look bigger. And we would all play there. And then
I saw a poster for this. It was like Tyrone's. It was like Love Tractor, Pylon. It was like Side Effects. All you guys on one bill. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
1982, I think.
You would go into the bathroom and there would be like, Eno is God. Would be instead of like, for a good time, Eno is God. And, there was a great record store downtown that, every week had imports of the latest, hippest singles from New York and from London. And they were, 45, little 45s of, the Clash, the Jam, all the, stuff that was, was non-commercial. And that's how we heard everything. It's not like, we had the internet. So you pay $1.50 and buy a single. And, or, like there was a famous art professor who's a great friend, Robert Croker, who taught painting and drawing at the University of Georgia, who always had the best parties. And I remember going to one of his parties, and he lived out towards Winterville, and he would always show the incredible shrinking man on the side of a van. The party would, of course, would go on until, sunrise. And hearing Devo's first single, Satisfaction, I guess it was Satisfaction, but it wasn't even out on Warner Brothers. It was, self-produced. And that was what the network was. It was, passing around all of these sort of singles that bands would self-produce and put out. And, the B-52's first single, Danny Beard put it out. And he owned, Wax and Facts in Atlanta, and that eventually became DB Records, which, if not for DB Records, there wouldn't be an Athens scene. There are a couple of people. That's why I call it scenism. If it wasn't for Danny Beard, for Jeremy Ayers, John C. Wright, Sam C. Wright, a number of people that, Robert Waldrop. I mean, I could go on. A number of women also, feminism was a really big deal. And the women in the scene really controlled. I mean, they fucking cracked the whip.
In what way?
And just like, guys, get it together. And we want this. This is a great song, or also everything was very ahead of its time. I mean, every band, I would say every band was feminist. It was all LGBTQ positive. There were gay members in every band. And it was this rarity. It was just very interesting. And you can read, Grace Hale's book, which I think is a really good book. My opinion is, of all of the books that have been written about Athens, it's probably the closest, but
What was the name of her book? Is it Cool Town?
Cool Town.
Yeah, I love that one. That's great.
To me, it's sort of halfway through. Grace, don't shoot me, because I really like her.
Yeah.
But to me, halfway through it falls apart because I'm only focused on when we were in Athens and we were experiencing what was going on with the B-52s and the other bands that were happening and whatnot. And once it became a commercial scene, I had no interest in it whatsoever. And also, we were on the road then.
Yeah, so you kind of lose touch with Athens when that happens?
Yeah, in fact, we were bigger in other towns than we were in Athens.
Really? That's wild.
We would play Austin, and we were much bigger in Austin than we were in Athens. Or we'd play Washington, D.C. or New York, or, we would go to Los Angeles, and the fire department would come and shut down our shows.
Really?
And,
that's crazy.
And we would be gone from Athens for so long. We'd come back and we kind of feel like we'd have to beg for a show.
Really?
It was crazy.
Bizarre. So it's kind of like Athens. Whilst it's your hometown, like it seems like it can only take you so far. Like you have to expand. It'd be easy to stay in Athens band, is what I'm always saying. It's like you kind of have to tour though if you want to cross that plane per se.
Well, that's the way I always looked at it. Was people write the history of Athens, and to me, it's like the bands that went out and toured, I have respect for. The bands that didn't, I just they were just kind of hanging out trying to get laid and get free drugs and beer and whatnot, and be part of the scene and not put in the work. I mean, because everyone else really put in a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
And we put in a lot of hard work that other people really got to take advantage of, and which is great. I mean, I felt like for me, I felt like Athens had sort of died in the late 80s, early 90s until Elephant Six happened. And they really came in and revitalized it.
And what year was that, or what time period? I'm not familiar with it.
Sometime in the 90s. Gotcha. With Olivia Tremor Control and Apples and Stereo and Neutral Milk Hotel and a bunch of great bands, really terrific bands. And they were doing their own thing. They weren't, trying to make commercial hits. It wasn't like Matthew Sweet, who moved to Athens, was the first person outside of the scene to move to Athens, to use Athens very smartly. So to use Athens to get a huge record deal with Columbia Records.
Oh, really? So like the cloud of living there kind of got it for him? Yeah.
And
interesting.
I don't blame him.
Yeah, that's pretty wise, I suppose.
But Matthew's really talented. He's a talented guy, and he graduated high school and moved to Athens in order to, and he immediately ingratiated himself with everyone in the scene, and and good for him. And he worked at it. He really worked, and but there were plenty of bands that were. No, you don't know, but we're just kind of hanger-ons. And
I kind of know what you mean. Like I see bands around town. I'm pretty in touch with that sort of thing. And like, I see them like not touring and like kind of still expecting something to happen. Like I don't get it. If you get what I mean. Like, why would you not go out and try to build everywhere sort of? Right. And it is difficult and expensive. We were in Tuscaloosa this weekend with my band, and even then, when we tell them we're from Athens, it still carries some weight, man. They go, Widespread Panic and R.E.M. and Love Tractor. I was like, yeah, man, that's where we're from.
Yeah. Widespread Panic. I mean, Widespread Panic was what I loved about that they're such great guys. And what I loved about them is they came along and became really big and famous by doing something completely different than what the rest of us were doing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They came along and, they did complete jam band,
Yeah.
full, all out.
Sounds nothing alike.
And became huge for it, which I really love the fact that they did that, and that they weren't, like these hipster art kids that, were.
I think they have a song named Love Tractor, don't they?
They do have a song named Love Tractor, and we have a song called Widespread Panic. But, we're all friends with those guys.
Where did the name come from? I meant to kind of start with this because I've always kind of wondered what was the influence on the name.
LSD.
Oh, really?
As we used to call it, love and spiritual development.
That's hilarious, man. Well, I watch all the videos that I can find on YouTube. Some of the videos, gosh, I can't think of one. Maybe Venice. Like, there's kind of I hate to say a country theme, but it's like usually you guys out in some sort of country area or country house or something, right? Was that purposeful, or was just Athens?
It's just a location.
Yeah.
I mean, the first video we ever did was from our second album, and it was a song that we did kind of as a joke on the album, where we were just jamming, and we came up with this kind of country riff song, and I picked up a banjo and I was playing a banjo, and of course the record company said, well, this is actually a great pop song, let's do a video for it. We're like, okay. And so we went up to North Georgia near Howard Finster's place and did this video for it, which MTV was just starting. So it got a ton of play on MTV. And I remember we were touring the record, and we were in Los Angeles, and we had a bunch of record companies fighting over us, and we weren't interested in any of the record companies because they wanted us to be what that one with that song "Spin Your Partner."
Yeah.
They wanted. We were sitting in a meeting at EMI with Craig Leon, who's a really famous producer, produced a great album by a band called Suicide, which influenced techno pop music more than anything. It's like Suicide and Kraftwerk. I mean, and I think he produced Blondie's second album. Produced a bunch of people, a bunch of Sire acts that were on Sire Records. And so they had Craig in the room and the A&R team, and they, sat us down, and they were whining and dining us, and you're going to be this. We got Craig to produce the record. We got this new thing that's happening, and it's this country rock thing, and they were describing to us, it's like folk revival country rock, and we're like, that's not us. We did one song, as something like that, and but that's not us. And so they ended up signing Lone Justice and Jason and the Nashville Scorchers, who
really,
and we were like, we were not interested in that. It's like anyone would have said, yeah, please, we want a record deal, because everyone wanted a record deal from a major label then. But it always came at a cost.
Yeah, you had to give something up.
Always came at a cost, and we were never really willing to pay that price.
I think that's respectable, man. Very respectable. I had wondered though, for the themes reissue, there's a few songs that you guys are dropping. I think, is it I Broke My Saw? There's a long version. Is this just version? I'd wondered if there was label pressure for you guys to make it shorter and more singly, or
we decided that that the song was long, and that one of the choruses wasn't right, and we actually spliced in. If you listen really closely, the regular version of it, the first chorus and the second chorus are exactly the same.
Really?
And So we spliced the song up and we cut it in a certain way that just felt better. That and that other section just was sitting in, it was sort of dropped in and was part of our writing process. And we were sort of self-producing. And with Mitch also, I mean, Mitch was producing too. And we were all like, yeah, what is the point of this piece right here? And, you know, we were trying to tighten up the song, really, is what we were trying to do. And, you know, then when we went back through and we listened, we're like, wow, actually, that's really, you know, I like that.
Here's an extra 2 minutes. Yeah. It sounds great, man. I love it. I've been listening to.
I love it too.
Yeah.
I like those mixes. I like the mix of it's called Nighttime Time Zone.
Yeah.
Which is actually Themes from Venus.
Yeah.
And Brendan O'Brien did that mix, and I kind of wish that he had done an entire mix of the album as well. Really? He mixed a few songs on the record, but then eventually we took it back up to Mitch, because Mitch was really where our head was at. Brendan's great.
Yeah.
Brendan was doing something that I think maybe it was me personally, I was trying to stay away from, which was he was mixing the record to sound like the times, to sound exactly like that era.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't want it to sound like that. I wanted it to have its own, you know, sound to its own. And Mitch really got that. And probably to Danny Beard's chagrin, you know, we went back up to Mitch to finish the record. But Brendan's like, I love Brendan's mix of it. Like, I listen to it now and I'm like, God damn it, why didn't we have to mix the whole record also, you know, because he had all the tracks and we were cutting stuff with him. We were bouncing between Mitch and Brendan. You know, it was much easier. Brendan was in Atlanta doing work, and we were in Athens for us to drive to Atlanta, because there was no music industry in Athens. There was none. There was
studios.
There were no studios. There was Chick Piano, which now is closing.
Yeah, I hate to hear
unfortunately. And those sweet guys at Chick Piano, and so it was much easier for us to go to Atlanta and do work than to drive all the way to Winston-Salem.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, but it came down to kind of like, you know, I just wasn't digging what Brendan at the time was putting out, because it was sounding too commercial to my ears.
Totally.
And so we went back to, and I think the other guys agreed. And I can only speak for myself, because I can only remember what I was thinking at the time. Armstead remembers what everybody would be thinking. He has the memory of an elephant. And, but I really like his mix. I really like that. And I think there's some other mixes of his, but we didn't include those.
If I'm not mistaken, isn't it? Let me think. Nighttime Time Zone, same as Themes from Venus, and there's saxophone on Themes for Venus, and there's no sax on the Brendan mix, correct? And it's a little more synthy, maybe, right?
It's all the synths are still there.
Yeah.
The thing about that album is no one ever notices it. Is the album is covered in synthesizer.
Yeah, it's like soft synth kind of vibe.
It is. I was gifted. Our sound man at the time gifted a Yamaha CS80, which is probably the most expensive, coveted synthesizer you could ever have.
Really?
Look online for one right now. They cost $30,000 to $50,000.
Ooh, buddy.
But when he gifted it to me, it was worth nothing. It weighed maybe 300 pounds.
Good Lord.
And it was all hardwired, and it only had 4 memory slots that you would have to lift this thing open, and it had little mini sliders in to, you know, that mimicked the major part of the keyboard. And then it had 4 slots inside there that you could have memory. So it wasn't, you know, it was the same synth that Vangelis used to do Blade Runner.
Okay.
All the music on Blade Runner. It's the most unique sounding synthesizer ever. And so all of those sounds that are on that record are a CS80 or Yamaha CS80, which the power supply eventually burnt out. And I was like, oh, you know, I had all these digital synths, and I was like, well, these are easier and faster, and they're lighter and whatnot. And John Poe, who was in Guadalcanal Diary, I left it with him and said, see if you can get the power supply fixed. And, you know, I was like, and I wish I had it now.
Yeah.
Trust me. I really wish I had it now. But
it's kind of the whole record sounds, like you say, like synthy, but it doesn't sound like you guys like went synth, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't sound like Jump by Van Halen. It sounds like subtle, like you guys are still, the guitar is still leading the way with some synth components, which is great.
But it's because of that type of synthesizer. That's what made that synth so interesting. It had it was the first synthesizer that had polyphonic aftertouch. So it's like how you played or pressed on the keys would impress or change the sound. And it had this real amazing warmth to it, and had a modulation matrix in it. I mean, I'm speaking, you know, synthesizer geek here.
I'm interested, man.
And it has this sound that no other synthesizer has, and which makes it probably one of the most coveted. That and the Yamaha DX1, which was the giant version of the DX7. And I only played one of them, and it's huge, and it was actually programmable, unlike a DX7. I played one in Austin one time at a music store, and those were selling for like $50,000. And but I got this synthesizer for free, and I was tired of playing guitar at the time, and I thought, oh God, I'm going to write a few songs using this machine, and so I don't have to play guitar. Because it's easier, because Mike would be singing and playing guitar, and so he was playing, you know, rock chords, and so I'm the one filling in all the other stuff on guitar, and it's like, you know, it's like, oh man, you know, it's like it's a lot of work.
Need a break.
I needed a break, and so we started lugging that around to shows and writing, but almost every song, I mean, Crash, that song Crash, is Yamaha CS80. Themes from Venus, Yamaha CS80. I mean, you hear the openings to those songs, like these sounds. That is out of that synth.
Interesting. And you're playing all the synths on the record? I was going to ask this because I'd wondered. And what was the thought process on, like, I don't know, I guess I assume they're in the originals, but like Crash and Satan were also released instrumental, correct?
Yeah. You know, for 2 reasons. One reason was I really liked the way they sounded instrumentally.
Yeah.
Because there was a density. It's a really thick record. And when you take the vocals off, you hear all this other instrumentation. And I wanted to have that and document that. And then also, if you have to go do like a TV show or perform someplace, and you mime to the song, but you'll sing it you'll sing it.
Yeah.
But the instruments aren't plugged in. So, you're playing like that.
Very
so
80s.
you have to have those.
Gotcha. So you already had it bounced down. Just toss it on there. It's 2 more tracks. I like it, man. When you guys are reissuing these records, though, I always wonder, like, does it kind of put you in that mode of like you're thinking about like just that era? Like, do you get, I hate to say nostalgic, but like when you're reissuing Themes for Venus, are you like just going back through the years, finding tour T-shirts, finding graphics, finding old artwork? No, not at all. Just
In
very,
fact, the exact opposite.
really.
To me, they sound, at least to me,
Uh-huh.
I'm the artist. So, and Armstead and Mike are the artists. To us,
Uh-huh.
they sound current. They sound
Yeah.
just exactly the way we wanted them to sound then as now. They don't sound dated to us. That was the sound that we intended them to be, and that's what they are.
Yeah.
Somebody might say, oh, it sounds dated, but actually, I've never heard, or at least no one's ever said that to my face.
Oh
You know,
man, it still sounds fresh, both of them.
they should sound fresh because that's
Yeah.
the way that's always our intent when we write and record. Is we're writing for right now. We're not trying to follow any trends.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
in fact,
amazing to me how like themes is like so like you could just tell it was written together. Like there's not a single track on there that to me like is an outlier as in like sound wise, like it sounds complete, man. And that's so difficult to do. So
yeah, it was really difficult to do.
Yeah, I imagine.
But that was the intention of the record. And we spent a lot of time. We're not the fastest band in the world,
Notably.
and we spent a lot of time writing that album and demoing the album and then taking it out and like going to Florida and slugging out in crummy clubs in Florida, and just playing, where people are screaming at us, play other songs, and we're like, no, we're playing these, we're just hammering them out on the road, to really learn it and know the songs and figure out what's working, what's not working, and which is kind of part of our process, and which we're trying to reintroduce into our process now. But it was, really written as that whole. And we're sitting on probably 30 songs right now. And we're trying to figure out how if we just go and record all of them and then see what works together. And that's not the way we normally work. So I have a feeling what we're going to probably end up doing is go record all of them more in a demo state fast and see what we like and what's working together, and then go out and play those back, like do a group of shows and play like a batch of those. Like, this is what we think works together. Yes. And try that out and see how that, because we still really think of writing an entire album. And it's also the way we grew up. I mean, the type of music that we listen to is teenagers and in the 70s. I mean, we all grew up listening to Roxy Music and Brian Eno and David Bowie and Kraftwerk. And I think we were the Velvet Underground, we were much more impressed by those acts than, we never, I love the Stones. I listen to the Stones, Pink Floyd. But we listened to these bands that really put out albums. And just like the fact that, like Bowie, when he did the album Low, that, he had the vision to have these two sides of the album. One is this rock and roll kind of art side, and the other is this complete sort of ambient side. And, the thought of that and the thought of going into that, of course, RCA hating,
of
getting
course,
that and just like hating it. And you listen to Low now, to me, it sounds just as current today as, anybody. And, more current than someone like Billie Eilish or, who I like, I actually, I like a lot of stuff that, is considered popular. Shut up, watch.
You good?
um,
You keep up with any Athens bands that are kind of starting to hit off these days, or are you kind of out of touch with the being in New York, kind of out of touch with the Athens
I'm a little
locals?
out of touch.
Uh-huh.
Being, I am a little, being here. I'm much more in touch with the bands here.
Totally.
Um, um, but yeah, I'm out of touch. I'm out of touch with the Athens bands right now.
A couple years on the road and moving to New York will do that, won't it?
Yeah, well, 20 years and 20 plus years in New York, and
Uh-huh.
but when Elephant Six, when all the bands like in the '90s, I was really digging all of that, and then there's some other bands I've heard. Mm, I'll have to get Valina, somebody to make me a tape.
Valina's got her ear to the ground for that sort of stuff.
She does.
Yeah, she's. I'm excited. She's going to be coming on the show after you. I'm very, very thrilled to talk to her for a while too.
Valina, tell her I said, hey,
I will. I will.
Valina and her sister are my sweethearts. I love them to death. And, again, another Athens, these Athens women that kick ass.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, these, like I said, I can't express how much in the early scene in Athens, how feminism and the acceptance of LGBTQ,
Mm-hmm.
was just done. It was there.
Yeah.
That, the women really, kicked ass.
Yeah.
And especially at our school. I mean, look at Vanessa, look at the B-52s.
Yeah.
Art school was all very masculine and
Really.
male dominated. And then, you've got, Vanessa and Cindy and Kate out there just kicking ass.
Gotta love it, man.
Yeah, it was great. It's amazing. And, hopefully there's going to be more of that,
Yeah.
but, I'm always looking for what is the next Athens band, do you think?
Well, there's speaking of women, actually, there's this two girls that are, I think they're 21 each, and they headlined the theater last night. I think they sold 600, 800 tickets, so they're just killing it right now. And
Really?
they're called Hotel Fiction. You should check them out. I think they're next up, but just two awesome girls. Yeah, they're talented. I'll have to send you some songs over, man. But it's just funny that you say that because literally last night they stepped it up to the theater, which is kind of a traveling grounds for everybody. Speaking of which, though, I wonder why you guys, when you come back to Athens, you do 2 nights at 40 Watt instead of 1 night at the theater.
Because it's the 40 Watt.
Yeah, gotcha. That was answered. I love it.
It's Barry and it's Felina, and that's just, I mean, years ago we used to play the theater all the time, and that was simply because the 40 Watt was, I think it was where Caledonia was. It was in between, before it had moved to the current location on Washington Street.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of my streets.
No worries.
So we would play the theater, and the smelly. It was such a different place then than what that theater is now. But it was the same size and the same thing, and it sounded great, and so. But it's run now. It's a big corporate thing.
AEG thing, yeah. It definitely doesn't carry the same weight as the 40 Watt, like in the sense of history. Even the B-52s, I think, wasn't their first or second show at the theater, didn't they? Somewhere in there, I think.
They played. Yeah, they played one show at the theater.
Yeah.
With the Fabulous Phyllis opening, and that was sort of their last hurrah show in Athens. And then boom, they went to New York. That was like
Totally.
their farewell show.
So back in your day, was every band like dying to get into theater? Because kind of now, that's kind of how it is. That's like when you prove you can sell tickets at 40 watt, it's like, oh, we can finally play the theater.
Somebody outside of whoever ran the theater at the time,
Uh-huh.
they were promoting like hillbilly bands.
Really?
And so somebody promoted that show at the theater for the B-52s. Some outside promoter rented the theater
Uh-huh.
and put the show on.
Gotcha.
And maybe it was an Atlanta promoter or somebody like
Mhm.
that. But they wouldn't. The Georgia Theater would not book somebody like the B-52s.
Gotcha.
And when we came along, Kyle from the Uptown Lounge was handling it and booking it. And so there was like the Uptown Lounge was sort of the competitor to the 40 watt.
Really?
And but we had become, our audience had grown, so that it just wasn't comfortable for them to, be in one of those clubs.
Gotcha.
And so we would play the Georgia Theater, and until the 40 watt finally moved into. They move into that space?
There's so many, it's hard to decipher sometimes.
Because I honestly don't remember us playing any of the themes from Venus stuff at that 40 watt. That I remember us playing at the Georgia Theater, the themes from Venus stuff.
Where was Inside Out filmed at? That'd be 40 watt Uptown.
That was Uptown, and that was 1988. It was filmed.
Gotcha. Was that like a big deal for you guys then? Was that really cool that somebody was making this cool documentary about the scene, or was it like, nah, we're just playing?
Just playing.
Yeah. I like the song from that one too. It's great.
Thanks. I mean, we were on tour, and
Yeah.
we were either just about to record This Ain't No Outer Spaceship. We just signed to Big Time RCA, and we were kind of road jaded, so people wanted to do that. I kind of felt like Athens, Georgia Inside Out they'd come a little bit too late.
Gotcha. Yeah. So they missed a little bit of it.
Yeah. I think they came a little, it's like if someone had wanted to make that movie, they should have come 3 years earlier.
Ah, gotcha. I see what you mean.
And so, and the movie itself is, to me, I think there's a famous movie called Vernon. Is it Vernon, Florida? Vernon. That I think they were originally really coming not to document the scene, but to sort of make fun of it, that how hillbilly it was.
They came to Athens?
Yeah. But then it became, then they realized what it could be with Athens, Georgia Inside Out. And, with R.E.M's participation, especially, R.E.M wasn't going to participate in something that was, going to be garbage.
Of course.
Thank you, R.E.M.
Yes, thank you.
But we just, I remember the time, for us, it just wasn't any big deal for us.
Yeah.
Because we were already, doing interviews on MTV and, doing the cutting edge and doing shows on MTV and stuff like that. And we were playing like, MTV Spring Break.
Really?
Stuff like that, so.
Rock Goes to College.
Yeah, they would have it like at Daytona or someplace on the, Florida. And, we would do those shows and those would be televised. And so, it wasn't that big of a deal for us, except, we just, whatever songs we played, we want to make sure they were the right songs. And we picked, what we picked. And in fact, there was even a film that was done earlier on Pylon, stopped playing in 1982, and it was their last show. And there was a club called the Mad Hatter, which was down in the Warehouse District, which has now been destroyed.
Yeah.
Which was on Foundry Street.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a huge warehouse, and Pylon played their last show. Of course, they got back together. And we opened the show because it was sort of like the passing of the torch, and it was like,
Gotcha.
because Michael and Curtis, I guess, were all housemates at the time, but we were terrible that night, and the Agar brothers filmed it as sort of a potential, like, they realized that there's something happening in Athens and might as well start documenting all these bands.
Absolutely.
And, so they had already done that, and lucky for us, unlucky for them, not much happened with it, because we, for some reason, it was one of those nights where you're just off.
Yeah.
You're a musician, so
totally. I know exactly.
And, we were just completely off until like Peter and Mike, Peter Buck and Mike jumped up for the encore, and we, did like ZZ Top covers on the encore.
Really?
Just like, fuck it at that point. We were just like, let's have fun. And which we would all do. We had this thing called Wheel of Cheese, which was anyone from one of the bands we would book a Wheel of Cheese show, and that meant anyone from any one of the bands could show up and play, as long as there wasn't a practice and they didn't already know the song. So it was like, what are we going to play? Okay, well, let's try to play this. And, like To Serve With Love, or, name some corny song from the time. And, Jump by like Van Halen. And like totally trash it out.
Yeah. That's interesting, man. I'd read something. I want to see what you thought about this. Maybe it's not true, because I only read it one place that, like, at one point in time, R.E.M. was catching some flack because at the beginning of their kind of era, they were doing a ton of covers, right? Is this true at all?
Well, no, they were smart, because when we all started at the same time, but they hadn't really written a book of original songs yet. They had a few, and they had, Michael as the front man, so they could go out and do covers that were really like, Gloria and even Elvis stuff, and knock it out of the park, and throw in so each show they would do, it might be like, let's say the first time at a club, it was like all covers and maybe 2 originals. Then the next time it would be, 5 originals and 5 covers. Then the next time it would be 7 originals and 3 covers. So that's what they, would do, just to fill it in. So they were playing and practicing and really learning how to perform together as a band.
Seems very smart, and kind of builds the audience, sort of.
And it built the audience. And it was really smart on their part. I wonder if it was Bill's idea, but it did. It built an audience, and it built an audience that accepted them immediately, because the songs were known songs, but they were rock classics.
Gotcha.
And Michael was a whirling dervish, so dynamic on stage. And a lot of people try to rag them and say, oh, they just came out like as a cover band. It's like, no. They were learning how to be a band.
Yes, that's a good answer for that. I like that. And what was the Bill? Bill's in Love Tractor for a little while, right? Or is he just sitting in on the drums? What was it like to have him behind the kit for you guys?
Bill was great. Bill was
Mm.
around while we were writing our first album, and Kit was Kit Schwartz was drumming. He lived in the same house at Highland Park with me, and he also was in a band called the Side Effects. And he was very much into finishing college and going to work for CNN. CNN had just started up, and so he'd be like, "I can't do this. I've got too much work." And then we played one night, and we played like with like this little drum machine that went bump, pshim, bump, bump, pshim. And Bill was like, no. So Bill joined the band, and was playing in both bands, something that's really common now.
Totally. Especially
And
for a drummer.
but it was not common then. And Bill, at a certain point, Bill came to us and said, "Do you want to quit school and make a go of this? Because the time is right, and it's right now." And I said no.
Really? Okay.
Because I was in graphic design, and I put a ton of work in, and I had like another quarter or another, 2 quarters. It was still in the quarter system then.
Yes.
Which was 3 months, to go. And I had to finish it. And then he went to Michael and Peter and said, posed the same question.
Oh, okay.
And they said, "Let's do it."
Interesting.
And, that's Bill. And that's Bill, who is, really smart. And he was really tied into the music business because he worked, it wasn't Capricorn Records. He worked for the booking agency arm of IRS, which was FBI, or it was the booking agency arm of Capricorn Records in Macon, and like as a summer job. And really Bill's a really, really smart guy, and a really great songwriter to boot, which nobody knows, because all the songs are say R.E.M.
Yeah, all four.
And but everyone would come in with their songs, and Bill wrote great songs. And so he really had a sense of timing, and he really knew how to crack the whip. And he still cracks the whip. Like we go to Athens and rehearse at his house. And, he'll always want to come and play on a song or something like that. And it's like, I showed up one day and we were going to work on a certain song, and he, it was the old Bill where he, I love him. He's like a brother to me. But he was like, "What, you haven't rehearsed the song? You haven't learned it?" Because I hadn't had time. I'd been to, work with New York and whatnot. And I just hadn't sat down and like relearned a song. And I'm like, fuck. There was Bill being the, whip cracker like he was. And which I think he really was for R.E.M. too, until their management came along and really took over and did a really good job. And, same with the B-52s. I mean, the B-52s had a really horrible experience with management when they first started. A guy named Gary Kerfurst was managing them and really fucked them. And, then they switched management to, and I'm trying to think of the name of the company. Great guys, great management company, who gave them the push and the space to go and write Cosmic Thing, the record that took them into the stratosphere.
Absolutely.
And we were on the tour. We were along for the ride for that whole record with them. And, we started out playing these small venues, and all of a sudden, like the record took off and all the venues changed, became arenas. And it
Woo.
was so great just to see them, because they'd gone through this horrible, Ricky had died,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just so horribly tragic, his death. And, we never thought, we were all wondering if, they could pull it together and do it again.
Yeah.
And something Ricky was Keith was channeling Ricky,
Mm-hmm.
and sat down and wrote that album, and just knocked it out of the park. And it
Mm-hmm.
was amazing. Bigger success than anyone had ever expected for that record, for
You
them.
guys were lucky enough to be on the same tour that year, right?
It was fun. It was
60
fun.
dates, is that what you said?
Yeah, it was
That's a ton,
fun.
man.
It was,
Gosh.
it was a lot of fun. It's especially fun because it was, you're with your friends.
Yeah, yeah. That makes it so much better.
And, you know, Fred, I remember Fred saying one night we were doing it, he said, "Why didn't you play Beetlejuice last night?" And
That's a pretty
we
good
said, "Oh,
impression.
we wanted to switch up the set." And he goes, "I've had to play Rock Lobster for the past 12 years. Every show you can play Beetlejuice."
He's got a good point.
So you get that that's the way it was with everybody.
Yeah.
Everyone really wanted everyone else's success,
Yeah.
and that sort of advice, and like, guys, why aren't you doing this?
Yeah.
Or do some more, you need to be doing more dates, or you need to switch up your set, or you know
And it's not like that everywhere. You hear about like LA, like 80s, glam 80s is like, fuck this. I'm going to be the biggest band. You know what I mean? And Athens is the complete opposite of that. Y'all are helping each other out, man.
everyone's helping everyone out.
That's the
Everyone
way to do it.
was It was very different because
Mhm.
nobody was in it to be rock stars.
Yes. You guys were all making statements kind of,
We
or,
were,
putting out what you wanted to put out.
and we all did what we wanted to do, and obviously R.E.M. was the most successful,
Mhm.
uh, and you know, um, but they were successful by doing exactly what they wanted to do,
Mhm.
not by what a record company wanted them to do. I mean,
So
I think
true.
there might have been a moment like, Shiny Happy People or something where, a little bit of pressure from Warner Brothers, but, they pulled themselves back quickly from that.
Yeah.
And the same with the B-52s. It was like they did it on their own terms. Everyone, you know, and it was really important for everyone to do that. Yo, respect,
Yeah.
it
Street
was that.
cred.
Is really important. And we kept seeing all these other sort of Athens bands coming around, and trying to jump on everyone's coattails and
Yeah.
be successful. And it's like, be artistically successful.
Yeah, that first
Be
successful
artistically
second.
successful.
Yes, that makes so
Make
much
your own
sense.
music.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll be successful commercially from that.
Right.
Maybe not, but get the pleasure out of being successful from making your own work.
That's so well put, man. Is that the kind of, I guess, the advice you'd give for Athens bands or just bands in general these days? Is like, just make your artistic statement first and worry about the rest of it later?
Do your own thing.
Love that, man. Well, I
Yeah.
think you guys really did a good job. You've kind of instilled that here, and I've had probably 40 bands on the show, and it's kind of still like that, man. Everybody's still like, man, I love this band, I love that band. They're killing it. They're killing it. Everybody wants everybody to succeed here, man. So I appreciate y'all building the scene here for real. We're still enjoying it.
Thanks.
We're still soaking it in. And I appreciate you giving me 2 hours of your time, man. I think we're about to
Hey,
wrap it up if that's cool.
that's totally cool.
I have like one or two more little things I just want to know before we go, though.
Yeah.
This is just me curious. Do you have a favorite Love Tractor album? Is it hard to pick?
It's hard to pick.
Yeah,
It's hard to pick. I do love Themes from Venus.
me too, man. That's a good one.
I do love Themes from Venus.
It sounds so great front to back, man. You should be proud
Yeah.
of it. You have a
Yeah.
favorite REM record?
Automatic for the People.
Ooh, nice. Okay. Hey, why is that? Any reason? It just resonates?
It's a fucking gorgeous album.
Yeah, they hit their stride for sure.
It was, to me, it's the apex. It's
Yeah.
just, and it's an album that they didn't have any intention of writing, I don't think. And it just, and it's so out of its time.
Yeah.
It's like not what anyone was doing then. I mean, you know, you think it was like, that was like Pearl Jam and fucking Nirvana and everyone was going, and there's Automatic for the People. And it's just,
Here's Everybody Hurts, you know, it's way different.
It just slays me. It's such a good record.
And the production is amazing.
And Murmur and Chronic, you know, no one listens to Chronic Town, their first EP.
Huh?
Chronic Town.
Yes. Is that one with
Wolves Lower.
Yeah. Is
Is
Pretty Persuasion on there?
Yep.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. I like Green. I'm a big Green fan. I feel like Green doesn't get enough credit in my opinion. But
I like, you know, there was a record they did in the 90s called Reveal that didn't get, you know, we were in the studio remixing our first album, and Mike Mills stopped by, and I was, you know, we were talking about our careers and stuff. I said, I totally dug Reveal, which came out at the same time in 2001 that we put out The Sky at Night. And it kind of had the same vibe, oddly. And I really wasn't listening at that time to much current music. I was really off listening to really like weird shit, like, you know, 17th century Neapolitan music. I mean, I was like way out in another zone. And I think that album Reveal is really great.
Yeah.
And no one ever paid it any attention. You know, the B-52's second album is absolutely fucking genius, as is their first album. You know, to listen to, go and listen to Ricky Wilson's guitar playing on it, and you have to understand there are no overdubs on it. That he's playing lead and rhythm guitar at the same time.
That's wild.
You know, and you know, to have ever seen Pylon in their heyday live with Curtis on drums and Michael, you know, I mean, literally like the roof caving in a house or at a club, you know, it's just amazing. Just amazing.
Love to hear it.
You know, I really feel lucky, you know, that I got to see all of that. And I love all those people. And, you know, they're all sweethearts. And
if you'd have been 5 or 6 years later, you might have missed it all, man.
It was luck. It was luck. It was sheer luck.
Well, I love it, man. I thank you so much for coming on, dude. I enjoyed the hell out of this. This was a good time.
Jameson.
Yeah, dude. It was a pleasure to meet you over this. I'll try to keep you updated on all the Athens bands now. I got a ton of podcasts. You should check them out. You can see, you know, I'm trying to talk to all the bands these days, trying to catch the stories. Cause one thing about you guys kind of decade that, well, because it wasn't a thing, you know, there are no long form conversations with Love Tractor and R.E.M. You know what I mean? Like there's no 2-hour R.E.M. podcast in 83, you know, because I would love to hear that. I'd love to hear the Love Tractor one too, but now I'm trying to kind of catalog that for our generation.
Yeah, you know, there'd probably be more, you know, the guys that did Athens, Georgia Inside Out. I remember, I think Mills and I had been out partying the night before, and we went to some park where they interviewed us, and then they interviewed Mills. And Mills and I driving over there together, and we're like, oh man, I don't feel good. Shouldn't be saying this. You'll be pissed at me, but you know, I think they captured a lot more audio and interview questions than you know, was put out in the film.
Totally.
So maybe
somewhere,
maybe somebody will do a different cut of it. You know, I mean, I always thought that movie could have been edited better. So
have you ever listened to? This is just one other thing. Have you ever listened to it's on YouTube. It's like an R.E.M. soundboard recording at Tyrone's. Have you ever heard this? You're probably there, man.
I was probably there. I'm sure I was
That's like my go-to Athens listen is the Tyrone's on YouTube because I just think it's cool, man. They sound great.
probably mixed by Mike Hobbs, or Pat the Wiz. There are a bunch of those tapes floating around. There's a guy in Athens, Pat the Wiz, who did everybody's sound, either Mike Hobbs or Pat, and they have board tapes from all
Really?
shows.
I would love to hear those. You guys ever thought about doing a live record? Love Tractor Live? I'm sure there's some great clips out there, man. Gotta be.
Really, we used to play, there's a really famous radio station in Santa Monica, California called KCRW. And it's 100,000 watt station, which means it blankets Southern California and Arizona. And there was a really famous DJ named Deirdre, I think O'Connell was her last name. And she unfortunately just recently died. And so they're trying to so we played live on that station twice. Gotcha. On her show. It was called Snap. And they just came to us and said, can we put this out on a blog so other people can hear this? Because, rights issues. And we were like, yes, play. And I listened to it and I was like, oh my God, we were so good. And so to me, that's sort of like the live record. Yeah. Live, but sort of live in a radio studio. But other people have live recordings of us, but there's that live recording we did with Pylon. I would never want that to see the light of day.
Yeah, of course. Everybody has those nights.
Yeah. So maybe we will do a show and record it live.
Yeah.
But I'm sure people would want something from back in the day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm excited for the 40 watt shows coming up there in March, correct?
March 18th and 19th. Yeah.
March 18th and 19th. And how's the set list choices for that going? You guys just kind of free balling it or new material mainly?
Well, we'll be playing, the first album was re-released and then COVID hit. So we never supported that. So we'll play that album, which is 30 minutes in length.
Yeah.
And then we'll play a selection of stuff from Themes from Venus, all the hits. And then we'll play a selection of stuff from This Ain't No Outer Spaceship. It'll be a selection throughout, but it'll be heavy on the first album and
third.
I mean, you'll be hearing Broke My Saw.
Of course. The long version, right?
Maybe we haven't talked about that yet.
Yeah. Let's get the full version in there, man.
Yeah, we might get the full version in there. I'll have to go learn that part. So yeah, it'll be a mix of stuff, and Mike, of course, wants to play some new material, but I don't know yet. I don't know.
TBD.
Yeah, TBD.
Well, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you. It's so great to meet you. I had a blast, man.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jameson.
All right, man. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll be in touch, all right?
Okay, take care.
You too. Bye.
See you at the show.
Oh, I can't wait.
Okay, bye-bye.
Got me running, got me